Well, hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, we're here to talk about the fun stuff, making privacy fun. So I'm the co-founder of PRIVO, formed the company in 2001 when COPPA first came onto the landscape, so I know I'm aging myself. I might be called the grandmother of COPPA. We are a safe harbor. We certify companies' compliance around the law, but we also offer registration, identity, and consent management services to help companies get it done and actually get the parents' consent that they need. So, oops, let's see. That's not going to work. Okay. All right, so privacy, please. We teach our kids to, look both ways before they cross the street, not to talk to strangers, to say please and thank you, right? So it's really important that we teach them the rules of the road for online. It starts with the first click with kids, and those rules are better understood by the children sometimes than they are by the parents and others who are supposed to help them and stay in line. What we'd like to talk about is some of the legislation that you have to deal with. So by a show of hands, how many of you are educational products or service either formally or informally? Okay, so that's a good mix, FERPA has been around for a long time. It passed in 1974, well before any of us thought about the internet or uploading pictures from phones or carrying them around for that matter. It basically sets the stage for how companies interact with the school system. So the schools are required to get parental consent before they share your students' data. The law, FERPA, has been under review and is likely to be addressed at some level. But if we go back to our nutshell here, there's another rule called the Student Digital Privacy Act. I've also seen it referred to as Student Digital Privacy and Innovation Act. My State of the Union address that was just recent, President Obama talked a little bit about how student privacy is important. And this particular piece of legislation makes it interesting because in the world of COPPA, that's for commercial entities. So if you were building something for children, you might be inclined to say that you were educational because you thought it might get you around or away from COPPA. Now, if this particular act comes into place and you call yourself educational, then it will be squarely at you. If you are a site or service that is not calling yourselves educational or targeting that the education market, then you won't have to comply with this particular act. So some of the important things are California has passed its Student Digital Privacy Act. It goes into place, I believe, July 1. And it would say that there is no purposeful use of children's student data outside of the school system. So there is no concept for parental consent, for instance. And someone might say, well, why would you ever need that? Well, an example might be if you've got an app that's math, and kids are playing that in the 4th grade and the school year ends, and they'd like to take that home with them over the summer and continue the experience. That would not be possible under some of the rules that are coming out unless they build in a COPPA-like consent mechanism. So where does COPPA fit in? In the draft of the rule that I saw, there was a paragraph sort of plopped into the middle that said, okay, parents can waive their rights under this new rule if they provide consent like they would under COPPA. So it's yet to be seen what the rule's actually going to state, but I would hate to see that we take parents out of the equation and have a complete ban. It'll be difficult for innovation. So the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. You heard me saying COPPA, but you've probably heard it called COPPA. So how many in the room would refer to it as COPPA? Okay, well, good. I get to teach you something. So there's a COPPA and a COPPA. In 1998, Congress passed the Children Online Protection Act and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And the first one, the COPPA, was set aside by the First Amendment rights folks in the Supreme Court because it basically would have said that before age-restricted products and services can serve up content to us, we would have to prove that we were an adult to access that. And that means that we would have, as adults, been pulling out credit cards and other means. They had hoped that we'd have digital signatures. I don't know how many in the room have a digital signature, but most people don't. I see a few hands. COPPA, they basically said, look, parents can put a filter on their machines and stop kids from getting to inappropriate content. So it was a parenting job. But COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, isn't so easy, right? Fantasy football is COPPA triggering. Why would a filter stop you from going to the NFL? Well, I mean, if they keep up their actions, someone might say. But I'm a big fan still. COPPA is really a marketer's law, okay? It basically says, look, before you collect any personally identifiable information from a child, 12 and under, so you'll hear people say, 13 and under, they'll get it mixed up. It's 12 and under, and when you program your age gates, make sure your engineer knows that it's 13 plus and 12 and under, or they will most likely grab some piece of the 13-year-old and hold them back. It was meant to put parents in charge of what information is collected from children before we as marketers use that information to tailor our communication. So the important things, and I made a list, first of all, you need to know what your audience is. So in the world of COPPA, you're either general audience or you're directed to children. If you're directed to children, which probably most of your services are that are in the room, your next question is, are you primarily directed to children or do you have a mixed audience? And that is a very critical distinction because as a primarily directed to children service, you do not have the luxury of an age gate. There is no, how old are you? Let me treat you one way or the other. If you are properly categorized as mixed audience, and we can thank Disney for suggesting that to the FTC a few years ago when they were going through their review, then you can use an age gate. And the age gate has to be neutral. So it may be, what is your date of birth? That's what most people will see. Excuse me. And your lawyers may force you to do it that way. There's nothing that says it has to be done that way. You may have a perfectly legitimate situation where you have adults and children, where you might say, are you the parent or the child player? So depending on your particular service and what your audience makeup really is, you'll need to look at how you do your age gating. Understand what constitutes personally identifiable information. So the easy ones, right, are an email address, a home address, a first and last name. If you combine a first name, an age, a zip code, and maybe a couple more pieces of information that are non-personal, you may get to personal information. If you have a service or if you're a company that has multiple services and the child's display name is the same across multiple services, you may be creating personal information. But what's really critical is that you know that pictures, video, audio, IP address, device ID, anything that allows you to communicate, to find the user either online or offline, and what? Communicate your message. It's a marketer's law. That constitutes personally identifiable information. The next thing is, to get the proper level of parental consent and get it in the right order if you are going to collect the information. So like all laws, well, no, I shouldn't say that. The speed limit's 55, right? If you're going 56, we know that we're going over the speed limit, but we know we have a little wiggle room up to a certain amount, right? COPPA's pretty strict about the order in which you collect data. But it is not a ban on marketing. It is not a ban on the collection of data. It was meant to mitigate the amount of information that's collected, to be respectful of children and parents and the information, but it certainly is not a ban, and you shouldn't consider it such. To build your products and services so that they simply don't trigger COPPA means that you're going to have a pretty boring service eventually. You will be back talking to your attorneys and others trying to convince them that you need to open up some gates and be able to handle some features. But parental consent falls on a sliding scale. So that personally identifiable information that you're collecting requires verifiable parental consent in advance of the collection of the data. However, if you're using the information for very limited purposes, you may have an exception. So an example, I was talking to a client recently, and they had built their login for kids across a number of their services. And in order to not trigger COPPA, they created a username for the child, right? They auto-generated it. They collected a password, and they asked secret questions. And they found that in their secret questions, they were asking personal information, so they had to go back and try to switch that up a little bit. But in order to avoid COPPA, they didn't let the child create their own username. Why? Because as in the kids space, we've done kids a big disservice. Usernames were never intended to be display names to the public, right? And we've taught our kids that usernames and display names are one and the same. So in this case, in this particular case, that name would be the display name, so they didn't want the child to be able to create something. They didn't collect an email address for password reset. So for account administration, the kid better remember his secret questions. I can't remember my secret questions. I write them all down as the same answer. Forget the password. I'm answering the same dog for, it's my dog. He's the answer for everything, right? So I've said to that client, you're going to have massive drop-off in kids being able to remember their login credential to get back to their account, because they're not going to remember a name that you auto-generated. And they don't have an email to do password reset or a parent email associated, so you're really going to be in trouble. You're just going to have more and more accounts created. So under COPPA, there's an exception to collecting the email address for account administration. You can collect an email directly from the child. So if you're dealing with 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, they have their own email accounts. They have Facebook, after all. They have to be able to get to their account settings and log into these services. So you can collect the child's email for password reset, but you must then collect the parent email from the child. Doesn't mean that it's the right email, but from the child, so that you can notify the parent that you've collected this email for the purpose of password or account administration. And if you don't hear back from the parent, it's called notice and opt out. If we don't hear back from you, parent, Johnny's got an account. He's going to be able to interact on our site or service. We're not collecting any personal information, but he will have an account that he can get back to. Don't be alarmed. What I suggest then is sort of just in time, next step is, but parent, if you'll just click this link and tell us that it's okay, Johnny can have a more rich relationship with our service. He can do X, Y, and Z, and we'll talk about a few of those things. When you get to the point where you are allowing a child to potentially disclose information to the public, a picture or video, you've now stepped up to the highest level of what's considered verifiable parental consent, i.e. you have to do some identity verification and make sure you're dealing with an adult. We haven't even gotten to the point we know we're dealing with parents yet. The next thing, just new features and this just-in-time consent. Imagine that the kid has a play now mode, and 5 days from now he realizes that, gee, there's better things behind curtain number 3. Well, then let him click on curtain number 3 and ask for consent for that particular feature. You want to share your drawings and others? Well, then that's going to need your parents' consent, and invoke that process while the kid's still in play, and don't stop him from engaging with you just because you're asking for consent. And then obviously, work with your lawyers. There's 7 safe harbors that you can go to that are approved by the Federal Trade Commission. PRIVO is just one of them. Find a safe harbor that meets your needs, that gets you, and that's going to really work with you to help understand your marketing goals and aspirations, and stop giving you the no's, but rather give you the ammunition you need to go to your legal department and say, hey, I'm a savvy marketer. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know how to comply with the rules, and these are the engagement features that I'd like to make available. So hot off the press, we added this into our presentation here on Friday. The FTC released some new frequently asked questions. They rewrote some of the ones that nobody understood and had been telling them for years that we didn't think made a lot of sense. And those are around education. So I don't know, just today in the news, there was a big article about Politico put out about Pearson and basically all of the tracking and surveillance that we're doing on kids to make sure they're not giving out test questions and whatnot in their social networks, and they're not talking about things they shouldn't be doing. So there's a lot of issues right now around just our education systems and how they're hiring companies to track the children's behavior outside of the school system. And so we're going to see more and more of that. But in this particular case, and they just came out, one is, can an educational institution consent in the world of COPPA to apps, and consent on behalf of the parent? So how many of you believe the answer is yes, that an educational institution can consent? Well, the answer is yes. They absolutely can under certain circumstances. So the next question is, well, what are those circumstances? And that would be where the education district, school, has actually contracted with you as an operator. So if you are under contract and hopefully getting paid, then you're likely to be okay where the school can administer the parental consent on your behalf. If you are, however, just a really great app or service and teachers know about you and they want to use it, then they're really struggling with how to do that in a compliant way. More and more school systems I'm seeing are starting to sort of review services and put them into a form of an online service directory so that the people within the district can find those services. But you still need to be really careful because you as the operator is the one who has to comply with COPPA. Nobody's coming after the school for not getting the right level of consent. You have to provide your privacy notice and information that you would otherwise provide to the parent. You need to provide to the schools. We see the acceptable use and policies that the schools do at the beginning of the year, but I don't know that that's going to be quite enough as they engage with more and more services. I think that you're going to see them push towards your policies being available somewhere so that parents can actually go and read what it is that the school has authorized on their behalf. So from a COPPA checklist point, and there's up at the top of the room, Carol will have some of these. Grab one and just see whether or not you trigger just some quick questions. More and more I hear, well, we don't collect anything, but you're doing analytics. Are you doing analytics in a way that you are presenting yourself to the third-party networks as a child-directed service? Do you have Facebook authentication on your site? That may be okay in circumstances, especially now that they've made the move. And if you flag yourself as mixed audience, they will remove the link that says, don't have a Facebook, click here and sign up now, because the rule was allowing them to come into a mixed audience environment because you already have a relationship with Facebook or whoever the third-party social login might be. But when you pop up a screen that says, don't have one, create one here, then the operators were actually driving kids to create an account for 13 and over. So there are benefits to having a permissioned kid, but I can tell you that most people feel so beat down they don't know what to do. They don't even know what they would do if a parent said yes. And of course, I think, again, get in a room and forget about COPPA. Make a list of everything you want to do that you think makes your service the best it can be for the kids that you're trying to serve. And then start mapping that back to, does it trigger COPPA? Is there a way to work with, in advance of it triggering? And then how do you sort of scale up as you need more consent? But things like, push notifications, they trigger COPPA. So how can a push notification not trigger COPPA? Well, if your app has it built in and every kid's going to get the same push when they hit level 3, no problem. It's on the app. If your pictures are saved to the app and audio were saved to the app. But if you traverse the internet and you send it off to parse to push notifications and you can tailor them, then you've triggered COPPA's need for parental consent. But it's at a lower level, the email verification. It's not really that difficult to get over the hump. Things like newsletters, if you were sending something that's very generic, you may be able to use that exception, notice and opt-out. But if you're going to know that you've got a boy and a 10-year-old and tailor the communication, well, then now you have to step up to the next level. So I would say, or I'm not going to say, I should say, that getting parental consent is easy. It's actually not. It's very difficult because parents aren't familiar with it. They don't understand what these requests are that are coming. That same organization I was suggesting doesn't, when they do try to communicate to the parent, they don't have the child's first name. Well, what parent's going to open an email from some company, regardless of whether it's a brand we recognize, but they will 30-40% uptick if it says, Susie D would like to get your permission. A first name and the first initial of the last name is not PII. So for tell a friend features, you want to have that, or else the friend's not going to know who the heck sent it to them, right? So I would say get in the game. Don't let COPPA get you so constrained and conflicted that you don't actually get a good service out the door. PRIVO got in the game. We were part of the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace. It's a White House initiative that's run through the Department of Commerce. NIST sets the standards in technology. And I don't know if all of you would like to have more passwords. I'm sure most of you would like to at least create another 5 or 10 of them. But the goal is to get rid of weak methods for authenticating ourselves, right? We all have so many username and passwords. We can't remember them. We end up writing them down. We have the same one. You get into one service and you've gotten into all of them because we're not creating strong passwords. And kids have no idea how to create one. So as a quick example, Jack and Jill went up the hill to make that J and J, ampersand, WU, up to, 2 is number 2. Pick a phrase that you recognize and turn that into your own little secret code and teach your kids how to do the same thing. The National Strategy, or NSTIC, is looking for more privacy-enhanced, easy-to-use, secure, resilient ways for us to log into sites and services to do transactions online that require organizations to know what we are. I'm an adult. I might be a female. I might be something else. I'm at 21 and 20, so am I at 25? 25 my end? Okay. Alrighty, so let's move on to any questions. This is meant to get our heads out of the sand. And let's start throwing in and playing together. Let's make it easier for parents and kids alike. Any questions? It's a tough topic. Okay. Oh, I see one up here.
My question is, if you're creating an offline experience for kids to create and make things, and an online experience to say, parents, share with us your kids' experience, where does that fall in all this?
Well, I don't know the specifics of what you're saying, but I can give you an example that might help. So if you have a service that says, okay, parents, come and create your parent account. You're gonna have a kids club, and you're not going to register kids. When that parent registers that account, they provide some personal information. And then you provide maybe a sub-account to the child, right? A username and password so that they can go use the service. The catch is that COPPA is about the data that children provide to the company. So you haven't triggered COPPA at this stage, right? Until the child takes one click and you add that movement to the profile, and you've now made all of that data subject to COPPA. Because once the child provides you anything, either personal or non-personal, and you can now find them, get back to them, communicate to the device or to the parent account, or mark it back to the parent, then you're going to trigger COPPA. And that's another place people make a big mistake is if you're going to get parental consent, get it out of the way, make it very clear, and then ask the parent if they'd like to sign up for your parent news or for some sort of communication. But you'll be in violation if you use the child to get the parent email to then start marketing to the parent without doing that in a very thoughtful way. Anybody else? Okay, and we have a charging station out here. Please feel welcome to come and charge your devices and grab a cake pop. Thank you.